Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, tertiumquids.org. Go on there, find podcasts of previous shows, find out more about our Tuesday morning group coalition meetings. We just missed a great one with Wayne Cruz and Ken Cuccinelli at it. You got a little preview of it because they were guests on previous editions of this radio program. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting all the work we do, especially as we approach Election Day and beyond, as we work towards getting more freedom-oriented legislation passed through the Virginia General Assembly. Our first guest this week is program manager and contributor to Campus Reform. She is Hannah Scherlacher, and she's had something happen to her that is not unusual in our community. But first, Hannah, welcome to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be on with you. You guys have a great show. Thanks.
Thank you very much for joining us. I understand that our dear friends at the Southern Poverty Law Center, noted free thinkers and open-minded souls, have just added you to their hate list, as well as somebody engaging in hate crimes.
Right. So the irony of this is that I was placed on an anti-LGBT hate list because I did a radio interview with the Family Research Council. Now, the topic of that interview was about socialism, but because Family Research Council holds traditional family values, I was labeled an LGBT hater, and they essentially told me I was guilty by association. So just shows how these leftist groups are so quick to slap a hate label on anyone who strays from the left narrative.
But this is the scarlet letter of our new day. This is, we're going to try to damage your life by affixing some sort of label on you. Yet, if you talk to them about labeling and name calling, you would think that this would be anathema to what they do. And that's what I've found most fascinatingly ironic about groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, is they engage in the exact thing, almost as if it was ripped right from a page of Saul Alinsky's manual, in what they would claim that they're against.
Exactly. And, how ironic that their tactic to fight hate is to try to defame the character and destroy the career of a young woman. I just graduated college, and this has serious implications for not only my career, but my safety as well. But, this is the left's favorite bully tactic. It's to paint any opposition to the left as morally deficient and therefore unworthy of being part of the conversation. So they try to silence me, as they've been trying to silence conservatives for many years now. They labeled Dr. Ben Carson an extremist hater. Dr. Ben Carson. And, that they constantly defame groups just because they're conservative or Christian. And, they did some great work for civil rights back in the day. But once they defeated actual hate groups like the KKK, the funds kept funneling in, and they needed a new target. So that new target became Christians and conservatives. So they redefine hate, and they slap these hate labels on people. They position themselves as unbiased determiners of hate, but they're not. They fuel this identity fear politics, and it's dangerous to our society.
When you wind up hurting ourselves like this, I feel like there's a deeper concern, and perhaps this will circle back into the work you actually do, Hannah, at Campus Reform. Is it actually winds up making us more easily led and dominated by power structures because we feel isolated, because we've been isolated. We've been told this is your group, this is your herd, and this is all you're going to be. And I find that despicable, and I really find it troubling that our campuses, our institutes of higher learning, I will say in verbal air quotes, are becoming hotbeds of this stuff.
It's exactly right. And, what's most disturbing about their definition of hate is of the 917 groups that they deem hateful, they don't mention Antifa or Resist or By Any Means Necessary, which are groups that I report on almost every single day at Campus Reform. And we see violence from these groups all the time on college campuses, but groups like SPLC refuse to deem what they do as hateful. And, the students I work with, they're constantly labeled hateful, attacked, and ostracized by these groups for their conservative views. Just look at all the violence we see at Berkeley. Look at how a student hospitalized a professor because she was defending Charles Murray's right to speak at Middlebury College. So, we work with students who at Berkeley just a couple weeks ago were attacked with brass knuckles and lead pipes. They were routinely stalked and targeted, punched in the face by Antifa. And this is what our college campuses are breeding, because there's no accountability. There's no top-down accountability coming from authority. So these students get away with it. Professors are fueling the fire, and it's really dangerous because our campuses of higher education are supposed to be places where students can engage in dialogue and debate. How can we expect a next generation of leaders to emerge when we're only teaching them to stomp out and respond with violence and chaos to any ideas that they don't like? Students are defaulting to violence, I think, because of their frustration of not being able to express themselves, not being able to communicate an opposing view. And ironically, this is the generation that was brought up with, the use your words slogan as a communication tool over physical action. But this isn't happening. How are these students going to interact with foreign countries with diverse understandings and beliefs when there's no overriding dominant system that supports their tantrums?
Well, and Hannah, use your words only works when you feel like somebody's listening. And, we brought up Hannah Arendt, a sociologist from the 60s who, within 5 years of the establishment of the Great Society, warned in her book on violence that the bureaucracy that had been created and was growing, in leaps and bounds, even as we turned into 1970, was going to soon leave us with a tyranny without a tyrant. And I think this is what our young people, at first in the zeal for political correctness, being told that everyone has value, and then when you realize nobody's listening, that leaves you with this angry frustration of, hold it, I've been getting trophies my whole life. Why isn't anyone listening to me now? And it's sad because I think there are certainly good parenting strategies, bad parenting strategies, but at the end of the day, telling a child that they have no specialty, that they have no gifts from God that they can bring to their community outside of what they're told by a couple of establishment bureaucrats is despicable.
It really is. And the left, they take this moral high ground and they think they can determine what's acceptable, what's allowed, what's deemed hateful and acceptance. It's the embodiment of hypocrisy, and students are the ones paying the price. And taxpayers should actually be the ones outraged as well, all American citizens, because they're the ones who are giving into this without even realizing this indoctrination. And specifically, I work with this on college campuses, so I see firsthand how this works on campus, and I do see how this carries out into the real world too. These students are taking this fallacy with them off campus. They take this slogan of love and tolerance and acceptance, and they don't realize that they're redefining, they're totally taking they're kind of acting as the morality police and determining, what's acceptable, what's hateful, and they do it to wipe out any dissenting thought. It's really just pure hatred for any ideas they don't agree with, and they refuse to be reasoned with. They refuse to consider facts. They refuse conversation. They call themselves liberals, but they act against liberty through exercising complete intolerance toward dissenting thought. This is a serious problem, and we're really going to see this only get worse unless we crack down on administrators, on professors, and taxpayers. If we actually start standing up and holding these institutions accountable for what they are teaching our next generation of leaders.
Hannah Scherlacher is on with us from Campus Reform. She has just been labeled, as several of you probably know the feeling, finding yourself on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list, listed as hate groups or hate mongers. And here in our flagship city of Charlottesville, we have a college. You may have heard of it. It's UVA. And in it, the founder of the university developed a system by which the students and the professors were supposed to live together on this thing called the lawn. And yes, it's become famous because some neo-Nazis have decided that their degrees from UVA have taught them to be less than critical thinkers as well. And it was a cool place to march around with citronella candles. But besides towards that. The concept was that if the professors and the students weren't segregated from one another, then even after the classroom was done, ideas could be exchanged, thoughts could be brought forth, and critical thinking was more important than a specific series of answers. Hannah, how have we fallen so far from that ideal? Because I look at UVA as the original idea in American higher education, and perhaps that driving ideal that created the greatest generation and their children beyond that, and all the prosperity that came from a society that has created more freedom on the world than any other ever in the planet's history. Yet this university has now sort of become this hotbed of closed-mindedness, even with the lawn still being where the best and brightest students supposedly reside.
And it's sad. It's that we're seeing our leading institutions. UVA is, it used to be known for its academic excellence, and then we look at all the Ivy League schools. The Ivy League schools have almost become the hotbeds of this complete intolerance and a complete rejection of the idea of having a marketplace of ideas. And I think we got to this point because over time we allow it. There's the accountability. There's major flaw in the accountability that comes from top down. The administrators, like I said earlier, they add fuel to the fire, and this hostility in the classroom, it translates into a dangerous environment, both on and off campus. So, these conservative students, they routinely face social stigmatization and violent attacks if they express any ideas that divert from essentially the left's orthodoxy. They've proven to be just the opposite of tolerant. It's sad. And, the only effective change can really start by, eliminating these speech zones, allowing conservative speakers, implementing, higher standards and consequences for the professors who allow their views to influence their grading, because these professors, they hold power over the students' grades. So conservatives know when they walk on campus, they are told before to, if you have any dissenting ideas, then you remain silent. So, colleges, we just found this study by Institute of Higher Education that shows that 9% of colleges are now proactively recruiting conservative students because they're starting to realize the dampening effect that, liberal indoctrination has on not only their funding, but their enrollment. And I would argue that this is the wrong solution when you look at the real root problem of how we got to where we are. I think while we should acknowledge their effort for recruiting conservative students, we have to realize this is not the answer. This is only sending sheep to the slaughter. A better approach would be to protect free speech and thought in the classroom. And we do this by eliminating speech zones, allowing conservative speakers, and really just that accountability, holding professors accountable and allowing students to express their views. And these schools, like UVA, like these Ivy League schools, they'll probably find that they have a lot of conservatives already at their schools. They've just been silenced for too long. It's almost like they're conservatives in the closet.
Underground, yeah. Well,
yeah.
Let me ask you this, and this is on a grander scale, and I don't want to get deeper than everyone's Sunday morning breakfast could get to, but as a society, if we're going down this autocratic, almost prefabricated, everyone's going to get exactly the same. We're not going to teach anyone critical thought. We're going to kind of create this orthodoxy. We will pick and choose who the leaders of the community are by the right, you went to this right university, you got, and we'll give you the scholarships if we deem you appropriate. Eventually, like an inbreeding family, we're going to be left with very bad leadership, incapable, inept societal leaders, because we haven't raised them in that crucible of critical thought and challenge and competition. And your only ability is you're going to be the ones who have been able to climb the ladder to whatever committee leads this division or that division of the government. And just as a society, I rue the day that becomes the case, because we've watched other societies collapse with that kind of mindset of, we have a special little group of people that can pick the right people to lead this division or that division of the government.
That's exactly right. And it's really a disservice to the students who are taking that fallacy with them that everyone gets a trophy fallacy with them off campus, because they are our next generation, and they will pass through college with flying colors. They'll do great the 4 or 5 years that they're in college, but because they receive things like Play-Doh and bubble wrap and stress puppies. We've just reported on one school that is now allowing students to choose their own grades as a stress reduction policy. And we just reported on another college at Columbia University. Actually, the student body presidents are campaigning on giving free Play-Doh to their students, because this is what our college campuses are creating. This is what is working for them right now. But after their 4 years are up, they're going to go into the real world. They're not going to be able to, play with Play-Doh under their desk when their boss gives them an assignment that they don't like. They're not going to be able to cope with the stress and the reality of the real world. And that's just on a smaller scale. Think about what's going on right now with North Korea. How are students going to be able to interact and solve serious problems of world conflict, of international relations, when you're dealing with people who not only disagree with your choosing of political candidate, they have a completely different worldview, philosophy, an entirely different set of values. How are students going to make any progress in the world? How are we going to deal with people? How are we going to, not only deal with other countries, but deal with the person next to us, our coworkers? It's really going to be dangerous for our society.
Well, and you just scared the daylights out of me. I want some Play-Doh now, Hannah, after you say that. I've talked to human resource directors. They're already bearing the fruits of this. We're 20-plus years into the everybody gets a trophy movement, and human resource managers are already suffering the consequences of meeting a workforce that's never been told they were wrong, even through graduating American universities, and now they're trying to explain to them, no, that project you just handed in to me sucks and it's not going to work. And one of them was telling me he was threatened with a lawsuit because the employee that they were disciplining, and it didn't even discipline, just said your project is wrong. They were told they were going to bring them up on labor board charges. This is crazy places we've gone, Hannah.
It is, and that's what we're creating. It's sad. I mean, we laugh about it. Sometimes I have to remind myself every morning that, I'm not working for a satirical publication like The Onion. These stories are real. This is really, what people are expecting in the real world when they get the trophy, play with Play-Doh, choose their own grades in college. They're distraught. They're dumbfounded when they enter the real world. Just look at what happened with Google the other day, how the employee was fired for his thoughts on gender differences in the workplace.
And he was trying to help Google. He was actually saying it as a way to say, hey, this could make us better. And that's where I feel like is we lose the ability to have critical thought. And we're not raising thinkers, we're raising regurgitators. If you're not, given to that, nipping at the heels of something you think is wrong, we're just going to accept anything that's handed down to us.
Exactly, and I don't think it should come as a shock to anyone that the average age of the Google employee is 25 years old. This is my generation. These are the millennials who were indoctrinated for 4 years, and now they are the next generation of people who, the innovative generation that's, starting these new jobs, starting these organizations that are completely taking the same logic with them on campus into the workforce. This is why this employee at Google got fired just for having an unpopular opinion. We're going to start seeing more and more of this.
Please give us something hopeful to hang our hats on. Hannah Scherlacher, who's now on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate list for her work at Campus Reform. Please, we want to have something to walk away from with hope. That maybe the next generation gets it. That the 15 and 16-year-olds are coming up saying this is dumb, and they're seeing it, or that there are campuses that are getting it. Please give us something we can hang our hats on.
I work with college students across the nation on over 100 different campuses, and they are the ones who are risking their safety, their academic standing, and their popularity, really, to expose what's going on their campuses. They understand that in this case, sunshine is the best disinfectant because they're willing to record their professors in class. They're willing to take the backlash. And, I commend them. They're brave. They really are brave because this isn't just like petty politics anymore in the classroom. This is putting their safety at risk. I work with students who are attacked with brass knuckles and lead pipes and stalked and harassed. A girl I worked with the other day, she was chased at UC Berkeley. Antifa, they stalked her on Twitter and they attacked her while she was in her car.
Oh my
So these
God.
students are risking their safety, but that is my hope, that these students are standing up for free speech. They're standing up for their rights, not only for their own free speech, but for America as a whole, because they see this problem. They see at UC Berkeley what used to be the home of the free speech movement. It's now become its grave as well, and they're fighting back against it. So that is my hope, because they know their rights. They're taking legal steps to combat it, and people are there. We do have, liberty-loving Americans who are there to back them up. So that's my glimpse of hope. Just, it's only a few. They're rare and they're far in between, but they really are fighting. And, Campus Reform and other legal organizations are here behind them every step of the way.
Well, thank you so much for everything you do there. And again, it's campusreform.org. Help them out as well. Visit with them, get their stories, share them on social media as well, and help them every way you can as well. But Hannah, thank you so much. And, hang in there, because that is hopeful that there are students that are willing to take that risk and to take and to suffer the slings and arrows sometimes, and they used to be metaphoric slings and arrows, but now they're real slings and arrows of this outrage. But maybe like Dr. King before, the crazier they act, the more we look, legitimate for it. And that's all I can hope each time. But thank you so much for what you do, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, weekly radio news magazine, tertiumquid.org. Look up previous episodes of the programs as well there. Joining us now from the American Energy Freedom Center to talk about Dominion Power's Green Tariff is our next guest, Randy Randol. Randy, welcome to the program, and how are you doing today, sir?
Good to be here, and I'm really talking on behalf of myself, not the Energy Freedom Center.
Okay, well, my apologies. Didn't want to put you out of spot on that. And Randy, so first off, explain to our listeners exactly what you mean when you say green tariff.
Well, the devil is always in the details. So apparently, Dominion has filed for what they call a green tariff. So a customer can actually say, I want to pay more for my electricity because I wear a green hair shirt, and you got to be able to allow me to pay and buy power that you don't provide yourself, but you will the power to me. So solar or wind farms or whatever. So the green tariff is a rate structure that Dominion can put up on their website and put it on your bill. So if you buy this much energy because you want the so-called green power, I charge you this, not your normal rate.
So And understand that this is something that is wound into a little bit, if I understand it correctly, wound into what was going to be a lot of what the cap and trade schemes that the previous presidential administration was trying to put through, which was to subsidize the green energy programs, all the unaffordable and high-cost green energies, wind farms, solar farms, by taxing people more. But now, instead of making it mandatory, they've made it voluntary, correct?
Well, that's part of the story. You got that part right. But the whole idea is, we have Governor McAuliffe out there with planning to proceed with his ration and tax scheme that forces the issue. But this is a voluntary deal where somebody can say, I really want to buy this kind of power, so charge me more. And it's all part of the same scheme. It's designed to get everybody used to paying more when they can't really afford to. But some people like to do that just because they feel better.
Well, and what does Terry McAuliffe or what does Dominion wind up using the extra money for? Or do they just keep it and claim that they're putting it towards green sources of energy generation?
Yeah, good question. Look, the green tariff is designed to allow somebody to say, I'm buying wind power or solar power today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the issue is if you're not very careful about how you build that so-called tariff, the rate structure, then they can pocket extra money. So one of the issues with this whole tariff is to make certain that they unbundle the production, which is the plant and fuel cost from distribution and maintenance, that the rate really reflects true costs, no hidden subsidies, no cross subsidies. That's what we get in terms of issues when we get to something called net metering.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has a solar panel on their house and they want to sell back to the grid. But, I think the rural co-ops have the best approach. I would use a rural co-ops as kind of the bellwether to decide whether or not the rates that Dominion is going to charge for the standby rates is high enough. The rural co-ops come up with like a $32 a month charge versus, I think, $7 a month that Dominion had in mind. But that way, you make certain that all the costs are covered, and we know exactly what they are. And in terms of the rate structure, when you do something on under the Dominion banner, they get to earn a rate of return. But so now the Green Tariff should assure that they limit any earning on the rate of return based on the actual investment. So if they don't own the power plant, don't own the wind turbines or the solar panels, then they don't get to earn on that. You just pass the cost through. But they can earn on the distribution lines, everything else that they have to cover as part of their overhead.
Right. Well, the stuff they actually own, the stuff they've actually built.
Yeah, they built and they had to finance, so they had to recoup some investment, so they're allowed to earn on that. But they shouldn't be able to, gross up the amount that they charge you and earn on that too. Mm-hmm. That's one of the problems that we have with Dominion. And as you know, we got a huge issue now in Richmond about whether or not they should be allowed to keep the billion-dollar boondoggle as a result of getting a rate freeze a couple of years ago. So the whole idea was if you set a rate or a green tariff out there, we should demand that every 6 months we get a review of the rates. Mm-hmm. There should be no rate freeze. They have to make a lot of assumptions up front, and you got to revisit those routinely. Not once a year, not every 2 years, but every 6 months.
Well, it certainly seems like, and one of the biggest problems with Dominion is a transparency issue, and when you start to slide this from over here, one from column A, one from column B, one from column C, the average ratepayer, the average utility customer is not going to be able to follow the rabbit hole as easily as you laid it out there, Randy, for where this is all going. But does this go the other way, to borrow from their smart meters? Where it also helps Dominion push out competition? Oh, yeah. Look,
that's apparently one of their designs. Is look, if they get in front of this parade, then they're going to be the big green guy at the front. Said, look, we need full transparency, and they shouldn't be allowed to control what happens. There should be no subsidy for ratepayers that can get away with stuff, and we need review. So all those aspects have to be put in place. But Dominion wants to get in front of the parade and control the whole thing with their monopoly power. And they're very effective at it.
Now, being a state review, though, the General Assembly does have a certain amount of control over this. What is being proposed for the next General Assembly session, Randy, that will rein this in? Has there been anything, or are we still looking for a member of the General Assembly that's courageous enough to steward that?
Good question. Look, they normally set the guidelines for the State Corporation Commission to review these kinds of things. They set rates. And unfortunately, every time they come around and say, well, we need a mandate to do this, so they avoid public scrutiny. I would hope that as they consider the green tariff, that there would be a discussion in the General Assembly and the guidelines set down to require that the process be very transparent, very open, and tell them what they need to tell the public. So this doesn't get done behind closed doors. And the State Corporation Commission process is kind of a judicial process. I mean, you basically have judges. Mm-hmm. You have to spend a lot of time and effort to even present a case. I think the General Assembly has to take this issue on before it gets to the State Corporation Commission. But you're exactly right. Somebody's got to step up and say, "Look, come down and talk to us about what you have in mind. We may need to adjust the laws that govern the State Corporation Commission in terms of the green tariff.
And the State Corporation Commission, like many people would imagine on a statewide level, is just another level of this swamp, to borrow from the Washingtonian phrase, of appointees, political appointees who often are there simply to inoculate or shield the elected representatives from having to live up to what they've allowed to happen. So say your state senator can turn around and say, well, I didn't have anything to do with that Dominion deal. That's the State Corporation Commission, even though they're the ones tasked with, if not appointing, but approving the appointees of the governor onto the State Corporation Commission, correct?
Exactly. Look, the whole idea is to shuffle this off to a body that people don't really pay attention to, and all of a sudden you have a new tariff or new rate increase, whatever. They, by and large, do a pretty good job. But the problem is every now and then when the General Assembly says, I want to get this thing done, their mandates kind of distort the process. So in terms of these new ideas, we've got to make certain that the process is more transparent than what we have now. And there's nobody slipping an idea in that says, oh, we want you to do this no matter what the cost. So that's my concern. We've seen this before. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we've got this huge issue about a windfall for Dominion as a result of the rate freeze that was put in place a couple of years ago in anticipation of the Clean Power Plan being implemented, which is going by and by because of, thank God, President Trump. So exactly, we got to be very careful, and they should not be allowed to shuffle this off without more scrutiny by the General Assembly before they even take it up.
And this is indicative of what we're also seeing in healthcare, where the insurance companies are actually benefiting from the government, not being punished from it. And one would think, whether it be the green energy movement or healthcare reform, that these companies would be against it, but they're all for it because they found out ways to manipulate it to benefit them, right, Randy?
Oh, exactly. In fact, what came out last night was how much money the insurance companies have made with their stock improvement. There are like 4 or 5 companies are looking at 200-300% improvement in their stock since 2009, when Obamacare got put in place, because they're shielded from competition. They get the backdoor subsidy, and they get to capitalize on that. And we are at the other end of that stick. We take it in here.
And so Dominion has figured out their own way to make the green energy movement, though it doesn't help anyone, especially the lower income earners in Virginia, and it will actually wind up being a passive tax on them by increasing their electric costs. Dominion's found a way, it seems like, in this to profit from it.
Yes. In fact, look, you pointed to the very important issue. Every rate structure, every rate put in place should recognize that the people at the lowest end of the economic ladder should be the driver. So they come up and say, well, we have an average rate increase of whatever. So look, I want to be worried about who can afford this if they're at the lower end of the economic ladder, because if you create a problem for those people, then all of a sudden they have to come back around the corner and subsidize their fuel bills or their power bills.
Right.
So we get hit twice.
Right, so the government winds up picking up the tab for the people they just wound up making, and Dominion laughs all the way to the bank. Meanwhile, even the Southern Environmental Law Center, who often is not in the same corner as this program on a lot of policy issues, is also along with opposing Dominion on this green tariff, correct?
I haven't seen that detail yet, and I was trying to figure out who's already aligned with this idea, but if you've seen the story, that makes sense.
Well, this is I've got a quote here from Will Cleveland at the Southern Environmental Law Center. It says, what's important here is that the State Corporation Commission look behind the green tariff to ensure that Dominion is giving customers a true and fair rate. The last thing we want is an approved green tariff that is so bad that no one signs up for it. And if that happens, the only thing Dominion filing will achieve is to box out third parties from offering other customers what they actually want. So again, locking out the marketplace, by their size. Yeah.
Well, look, part of that comment I agree with, but part of it I do not. But the whole issue is we need to understand what Dominion is going to do, what the tariff is going to be set up to do, is you got to have all the details, and we have to separate, like I said, the production costs from distribution and maintenance, and the standby costs. That's because the power grid is there, the lines, the maintenance, the plant that was installed in anticipating to provide power for people. When you don't use it, you still have to pay for the plant. So all those costs have to be put out as a kind of a baseline cost. So the idea is we cannot subsidize. In fact, it kind of sounds like the gentleman you quoted was kind of looking for a subsidy. Said, no, we got to be more transparent, and we got to understand exactly what's going down.
But that's it. Once the subsidy exists, Dominion's figured out how to make it work for them. So what about the governor's race coming up this year? There have been some energy issues, including things like the Atlantic Coast Pipeline that have come up in the governor's race, where even both candidates seem to be in favor of it, despite their party membership not being happy with them about it. What have if anything, the gubernatorial candidates addressed on the idea of this green tariff? And if at all, even?
Well, I haven't seen any commentary about the green tariff specifically, but the whole idea is that Virginia is a debtor state. We import 25% of the electricity we need, and almost 80% of the natural gas we use. We're building more gas plants, and we need pipelines, we need gas production, we need coal plants, we need it all. So the question is anybody out there saying, I don't want to do this stuff because until we produce enough for our consumption, we're still going to be in a debtor state. So I think, as I've seen some of the analyses, that Gillespie has identified that we need to do all this stuff the right way, and the other candidate doesn't quite see it that way. He's more aligned with the McAuliffe view of let's ration energy, let's tax it.
Mm-hmm. And then the government reaps benefit from it as well. I have seen that, and Ed Gillespie has talked about being more transparent in all of the levels of government, which would certainly apply to the State Corporation Commission and how they deal with Dominion, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, hopefully we'll have a piece of legislation introduced next year in the General Assembly to say, let's open up the State Corporation Commission process. Let's get more visibility in terms of the process and the participation at every level, so we know exactly what's happening, because right now it's kind of an arcane structure. People don't understand. If you look at the website, it's difficult to understand what they're considering. If you've ever been to a meeting of the State Corporation Commission, you sit there and say, now what just happened? So you need an ombudsman there to say, here's what they did to you.
Well, also, I've been to enough of these meetings where when people show up and sit in the gallery, often the members of these commissions look at you saying, what are you all doing here? Yeah, it's open to the public, but they're not expecting the public to show up.
Yeah, yes, why are you here?
Well, Randy, let me ask you this. Do you feel like, just in a perfect world, Randy Randol, on the green tariff, it seems like Virginia has itself twisted up in the way we manage our electric distribution as it is, and the average Virginian is given an impression that there's competition, but there's really not. And I wonder if at some point we can find a better way to get these electric utilities to be more competitive with one another, so that somebody who's generating electricity more inexpensively can deliver electricity to a kid in Richmond or a couple in Roanoke, or you name it.
Yeah. Well, they talked about deregulation some time ago, but apparently the powers that be fought back. But there are a few states like Texas that have full deregulation, so you can go out there, you can decide which electric company to buy electricity from, which gas company to buy from. So the old issue is between the producer and the consumer, you got distribution. Mm-hmm. So that needs to be unbundled, put in the hands of somebody else, the power lines and the maintenance, whatever. So the local guys take care of that. You take it out of play, then you can say, well, who's going to offer me the price I want and what kind of power I want to buy? So you could say, I want only natural gas. I want only coal. I want whatever.
Well, and certainly that was something that went on with the phone companies decades ago, Randy, is they said, okay, well, we understand that Ma Bell built all the phone lines and all the telephone poles, so we'll make sure she's made whole for the Bell system. But other than that, we're going to open up the competition on long distance so other companies might be able to do it less expensively and innovate technologically.
Exactly. That's what happened in the communication sector. It can happen in electricity. It's already happening in some states because they think it makes sense. But we're now kind of hidebound with the whole issue of let's protect the monopoly, let's proceed and go down that path. Let's assume that the State Corporation Commission can kind of act like the arbiter to force quasi competition. But these are franchises that are monopolies. And that's the whole issue. There's no competition. But now's the time to draw a line. Now's the time to start with competition by power providers. So be the renewables, wind turbines, or solar, whatever. So from now on, let's just say from anything new added, it's got to be independent, totally independent. And we want Dominion and others who handle the power lines to provide the service, to wield the power, but stand back. They don't get to control what you buy because somebody else is going to provide it.
I think it's a fair idea, and I agree with you on that, Randy. Where can people contact you or find out more about the Green Tariff? What's the best place for them to go to look for that kind of stuff?
Well, I'll tell you what. I work closely with the Virginia Tea Party Patriots Federation, and we will post some information as we get closer to this stuff. So I'll make certain you have the data as to where to contact us to provide the backup when they see legislation being proposed and the issue being debated in the General Assembly.
Well, I appreciate you joining us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio, Randy, and have a wonderful rest of the week, and thank you very much for taking some time out with us.
Thank you. Take care.